There's a large consensus that South Africa are the greatest rugby nation of all time. But how did they get there? Well, there was one man that puppeteered the whole thing. One man who brought superstars together into a rugby team. One man that brought unwavering success to South African rugby. This is the story of Rassie Erasmus and how he became the savior of South African rugby.
South Africa are back-to-back Rugby World Cup champions. They stand alone with a fourth.
Johan Erasmus was born on the 5th of November 1972. He grew up in a town called Dispatch, which is in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, near Port Elizabeth, alongside his youngest sister, Jannie. Like most kids in South Africa back in the day, and even today, he had dreams of becoming a professional rugby player. The theme of coming from humble beginnings is very common in South Africa, especially in the South African rugby team. And taking into account the fact that Rassie grew up in apartheid South Africa also shows how difficult it may have been for a kid growing up. Rassie's rugby journey began at Hoërskool Dispatch, where he loved his rugby. He would then go on to play rugby at the University of the Free State, where he would graduate in 1994. After his graduation, Rassie didn't really know where to look, so he stuck to what he knew, after being selected for the Free State's rugby team for the 1994 Currie Cup. Playing as a loose forward for the team, where it was number 6, 7 or 8, he continued to develop, he continued to grow, he continued to get better, and was finally selected for the Free State's debut in the Super Rugby season in 1997. He was selected for the Springbok squad in 1997 to play the British and Irish Lions in South Africa. Rassie would make his debut for the Springboks in a 35-16 win over the Lions in the third test. The series was already wrapped up, however, the fact that he got his debut in a dominant win was something special. He would go on to score his first try for the Springboks in his second game, and didn't look back, as he was then selected for the Tri-Nations squad in 1997, where the Springboks claimed their first Tri-Nations title ever, winning 4 games from 4 against New Zealand and Australia. Rassie then joined the Cats, which is now known as the Lions, from Johannesburg, and captained the team in 1999 and 2000. It must be noted that Rassie did make the Springbok squad for the 1999 World Cup, however, Australia were victors in the semi-finals against South Africa and they weren't able to defend their crown in the Rugby World Cup in 1999. After leaving the Lions in 2001, as well as missing out on the 2001 Tri-Nation squad, Rassie returned to the Free State for a brief stint before signing with the Stormers in Cape Town in 2003. He would play for the Stormers in their Super 12 season in 2003 and then call it quits for rugby as a player. Rassie Erasmus earned 36 Springbok caps, scoring 7 tries in a 10-year career. He also had the honour of winning a bronze medal in the 1999 World Cup. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg for the man from Dispatch, as his coaching career would be something remarkable. Rassie Erasmus began coaching in 2004 as the head coach of the Free State Cheetahs, his former team, leading them to the 2004 Vodacom Cup semi-finals. However, next year would be oh so special, as he would lead them to Currie Cup glory in 2005, their first Currie Cup trophy since 1976. Over the next few years, Rassie would garner attention for his unique coaching style, and was approached by South African Rugby to become a technical advisor for the Springboks. He joined them in 2007, however, after a brief stint, would return to the Stormers as their head coach in 2008. However, another surprise would come in 2009, as the Stormers completely revamped their structure. Rassie therefore became the senior professional coach, and future Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee was appointed as the Stormers head coach. The Western Province and Stormers group started becoming a powerhouse moving into 2011, and Rassie was announced as part of the 2011 Springboks management team for the Rugby World Cup. He was announced as a technical specialist. However, after losing to Australia in the quarterfinals, Rassie was meant to return to the Western Province. However, he would controversially quit, looking for better options. After a few small coaching jobs here and there in South Africa, Rassie would make the decision to spend the 2016 and 2017 season as Director of Rugby for Munster in Ireland. However, he became head coach of the team after the death of former head coach Anthony Foley. In 2 years as head coach of the team, Rassie made it to the semi-finals and finals consecutively. However, he would never be able to capture the Pro 12 championship. After this loss in the final, Rassie decided to return to South Africa as Director of Rugby in 2017. It must be noted that Rassie does still hold this Director of Rugby title to this day. It's fair to say that in 2017, South African rugby was struggling. Springboks hadn't won a World Cup in 10 years and were being overshadowed by the dominant New Zealand rugby team. Between 2015 and 2017, the All Blacks lost a total of 2 games, winning every single other game. In the same amount of time, the Springboks had a 17-17 record, with 17 wins and 17 losses. They had a young up-and-coming squad, however there was nothing there to gel them, to bring them together, to make them a South African team. They are known by a catchphrase, stronger together. And at this point in 2017, needless to say, they were not strong at all. In February 2018, Rassie Erasmus was named as the head coach of the Springboks, after former familiar face Alistair Coetzee, the man who took his job in the past, was sacked. In his first match against Wales, 13 players got their first cap for the Springboks. This was unprecedented, as 13 players who had never played for the Springboks before were about to make their full debuts. Amongst those 13 players were some familiar faces you may have heard of before. These included Makazole Mapimpi, Kwagga Smith, and Oxen Chair. 3 players that would be crucial to South Africa's success in the upcoming years. Although these players were making their debuts and would turn out to be superstars, South Africa would lose Rassie's first game in charge. However, Rassie would bounce back and a week later would get his first win as head coach of the Springboks. In that same year of 2018 in the Rugby Championship, South Africa would finish second, just behind New Zealand. However, many South Africans considered it a win, as South Africa would beat the All Blacks for the first time since 2009. Interesting to note that Rassie has publicly stated that he would have resigned if South Africa had lost that game against New Zealand, as that would have been their 3rd loss in a row, and he considered himself not worthy to take them to World Cup glory. This 2018 Rugby Championship would also be the birth of a rising star, a man who many consider as the greatest rugby player of all time. It's a very good thing that Rassie didn't resign, as after an up and down 2018 and 2019 season, Rassie would announce that after the 2019 Rugby World Cup, he would step down as head coach of the South African national team. He would state that he would just remain in his role as Director of Rugby. Coming into the 2019 Rugby World Cup, there was little hope for South Africa to become victors. They sat in 4th place on the World Rugby rankings, and although they had a triumphant win against New Zealand into the 2018 Rugby Championships, not much was expected of the Springboks in this tournament. The Springboks, led by their newly appointed captain Siya Kolisi, would lose to the favourites New Zealand in the pool stage, however would make it to the knockout stage, beating Japan 26-3 in the quarterfinals, Wales 19-16 right at the depths in the semi-finals, and booking their ticket to the final of the 2019 Rugby World Cup against England. Now historically there has always been bad blood between England and pretty much everyone, but specifically England and South Africa. There is a sort of vibe you get when the two teams play that you just know the teams don't like each other. And this wasn't helped as a lot of the England players at the time did their best to rile up their opponents. For some historical context, South Africa had previously won the Rugby World Cup twice, in 1995 and 2007. And in both those Rugby World Cup finals, they had not scored a single try. They had won the whole game on penalty kicks. And this was sort of the same thing in 2019, where the game started off with just penalty kicks being taken. However, one man would decide to step up to the plate, the man who had outshone every single other player at the 2019 Rugby World Cup. That man was Makazole Mapimpi.
A great tackle was from Wilson. Mapimpi putting him behind for Makazole, back to Makazole, Mapimpi! Oh my! the first time ever the Springboks score a try in a World Cup final. And the margin goes out to 11. And who else but Makazole Mapimpi?
Mapimpi would go on to tally 6 tries for the tournament, the third highest tally in the history of the Rugby World Cup. This wasn't all, as another young winger named Cheslin Kolbe would step up to the plate and cement South Africa's success as Rugby World Cup champions.
Pops up in a toy. Here comes Cheslin Kolbe. Kolbe bounces towards the fence. Beats one. Still going. Cheslin Kolbe. Cheslin Kolbe. South Africa. The World Cup is theirs.
South Africa beat England in the 2019 Rugby World Cup 32 points to 12, which was capped off by an amazing try by Cheslin Kolbe, where he literally left Owen Farrell lying on the ground and praying. This Rugby World Cup victory ignited hope into the lives of every South African back home, as it was the first time in 12 years that they had won a Rugby World Cup. Rassie Erasmus had led a 4th ranked rugby team in the world to World Cup glory, a team that was considered an underdog, a team that had no hope going into the tournament, but was filled with hope leaving the tournament. That team can only be the Springboks. The South African rugby team was on top of the world. They were ranked number 1, they were World Cup champions, they were starting to gain some traction as the best rugby team in the world. You had superstars like Siya Kolisi, Cheslin Kolbe, Eben Etzebeth, and Pieter-Steph du Toit, the man who won the 2019 Men's World Rugby Player of the Year. It's fair to say that as a South African living through this, it was like living in a movie, and you didn't think it could get any better than that. However, it would, as 4 years later, the Rugby World Cup would return. In 2023, the Rugby World Cup would come around again and would take place in France. As mentioned previously, Rassie stated that he would step down as head coach of the Springboks after the 2019 Rugby World Cup, and he did so, remaining in his role as director of rugby. His replacement was the new Springbok head coach Jacques Nienaber. These men, in conjunction with each other, would lead a hopeful South African national team to the 2023 Rugby World Cup in France. South Africa were overshadowed by Ireland in the 2023 World Cup as they were the favourites, and this was motivated as Ireland beat South Africa 13-8 in the pool stages of the tournament. We've seen this story before. In 2019, New Zealand, the favourites, beat South Africa in the pool stage. 2023, Ireland, the favourites, beat South Africa in the pool stage. It's all starting to line up, and it wouldn't disappoint, as in the quarterfinals, South Africa would beat the second favourites, France, by 1 point. In the semi-finals, they would beat another favourite, England, by 1 point, booking their ticket to their second consecutive Rugby World Cup final. Now, who did they meet in the 2023 Rugby World Cup final? Their arch rival, the All Blacks, a rivalry that stems decades, a rivalry where both teams had been completely and utterly dominant. And needless to say, this final was spectacular.
But it's over! It's over! South Africa!
South Africa beat New Zealand by 1 point, winning a second consecutive Rugby World Cup, becoming the first team in history to win 4 Rugby World Cups, and only the second team in history to win 2 back-to-back. This cemented South Africa as the greatest rugby nation of all time, and automatically made players like Dwayne Vermeulen, Eben Etzebeth, Siya Kolisi, Cheslin Kolbe, and Pieter-Steph du Toit rugby legends. as many rugby fans consider these 5 as some of the greatest rugby players ever. And all of the success was put together by one little boy from Dispatch. One boy who had dreams of playing for his national team. One boy who achieved that goal. And one boy who brought South Africa to glory. Brought them success. Brought them hope. He brought them stronger together. With Jacques Nienaber's departure from the Springboks after the 2023 Rugby World Cup, Rassie Erasmus has stepped back into that head coach role and will continue in that role until the 2027 World Cup has come to an end, where the Springboks will attempt the three-peat, the unprecedented 3 Rugby World Cups in a row. I think it's fair to say that as a South African, Rassie Erasmus has become a saviour, a man who has brought hope to a whole nation, a man who has brought rugby players together and made them stronger together, a man who has saved South African rugby.